Hello everyone, SparkZack here, and we're going to do a recap of the top-down shooter tutorial here in about an hour between me and Brian. I am going to go over some shooting mechanics and how to make some different kind of bullet shooters slash guns, as well as player movement, and some enemies. And then Brian's going to come in here, do a little bit of spawning and a little bit of beautification. So let me just walk through. By the end of this tutorial, by the end of this hour, you should be able to make a relatively good start to a top-down shooter. So let's get into it. The first thing you kind of want to think about when making a game is player movement, how your player is going to interact with the world, and how you are going to view the world through your camera. So here we have two objects that are pretty much going to be what I just described, player movement and how we view the world. Let's open up our camera. Right now, not much here. Neither of these have brains. Let's open up this camera. And we're going to make it a first-person camera without controls, meaning the mouse will not influence its position, or the stick if you're playing on an Xbox. And let's start making our player movement. So very easy controls, going to be using WASD, and I'm just going to say move. When this is pressed, I'm going to move right. Okay. So all this does is when we press A, moves right. But you see, since we only have when A is pressed, move right, unfortunately our character can go off the screen. So we're going to give them some boundaries to make sure that stays with the camera. The camera's not going to move, we'll have enemies come in, but our actual gameplay camera will not be moving. Everything will move on it. So to do this, let's add something. We say and, which means both these things on the win tile will have to evaluate true. So the A button will have to be pressed, and whatever I'm about to add also has to evaluate true. So I'm going to say position X, which is this object's position X, our right and left position. And I'm going to say greater, and I'm going to say -10. Okay, so that means if we go back here, we should stop moving as soon as we hit the edge of the screen. That's what we want. It'll keep our player on screen. We won't be leaving our gameplay area anytime soon. So let's kind of recreate this for every single key on the WASD. So let's do D. It's going to still track X. I'll have less than, and we'll just have regular 10. And instead of moving right, we'll move left. And then forward and backward, we'll be tracking Z. Right? No longer thinking about right and left, now we're thinking about forward, backwards. And let's have this be W. And W is going to move us backward. We want it to be, I think, yeah, greater than -10, and then this will be S, which we want us to move us forward. This will be less than, and then just normal 10. So now if we go and retest, oh, maybe not quite, or maybe. Yeah, it looks like I have those two a little mixed up here. So this, I want position C, I want this less than, and this will be normal 10. I want this greater than, and this will be -10. There you go. So now, well, I think our camera might just simply be panned out, or panned in, I should say, too close. Let's try that. So now if we go here, we kind of lock, and we kind of lock there. So instead of using 10 and -10, let's use a new number. say -8, and we'll say just normal 8. So now we have our player movement. This is a big part of what we want to do. This is how our player interacts with your game. So now we have the player kind of done. Let's think about the challenges we can throw at them. The first challenge I want to do is make a shooter. I'm going to make a classic kind of arcade shooter. So I want this to fire 4 different bullets in a spiral pattern. Kind of like your classic space game. So what we're going to do is first make 3 vectors. To start, let's do let's see. Okay, I'm going to need to make all my vectors. Values, vector, new vector. So I'm going to need to write. Let's lowercase these because they are a instance to something that isn't is an instance to a local variable. So those are usually lowercase. So right is going to equal position x. We'll do math plus 0.3. Well, that's what I'll have to say. X, right? Because this is 3 numbers. We're going to reference 1 number in this list of 3, the x, y, and z. I'm going to say specifically right's x is going to equal my position x plus, we'll say 0.3. We'll kind of do this the same for y as well. But this one, we don't want an offset. So we're just going to say just whatever my position y is. Same thing for z here. There we go. And since we kind of want to fire 4 of these at a time, we're going to copy this line. I'm going to paste it 3 more times. And we're going to change the vectors here and their offsets. So let's make left. And we will copy that tile and paste that. Get rid of right, get rid of right. And this is going to be minus 0.3. So now we have an object to our right, an object to our left. And let's do backwards and forwards now. So new vector variable, we'll do behind. Copy that, paste it. And get rid of these 2 right references. But we want this to be normal x, and now we're going to do behind is going to be negative y, right? So minus, same offset, 1.3. And we'll do the same thing here. We'll make a new vector variable. We'll say forward. Copy that. Paste it here. And remove right. Remove this offset and add offset onto z. So plus 0.3. So now we have our little spawn points, right? These are where we're going to spawn these bullets. Our right, left, behind, and forward vectors. Now we need to figure out when we want to spawn them and how we want to spawn them and if we want to do anything after we spawn them. So let's pick a timer. Countdown timer. I'm going to say 1.3, so every 3 seconds, and we'll put that in a loop. So what happens every 1.3 seconds? Well, we're going to have to make a couple of references to an object, which will be our bullet. So right now, let's go in here and say a new variable, one object variable. We're going to call this our left obj for object. So left left object is going to equal something we create. And at this point, we need to make sure we have our bullet created. So I'm going to slowly move out of our shooter brain and get into making our bullet, our enemy bullet. So here we go. Strength is down to 25%. Makes good bullet size. And open the brain. It's going to be a very simple brain. We'll say move with flying forward at speed 0.3. So relatively slow bullet. That's all this bullet is going to do for right now. So now we have a bullet we can reference. And we will go to properties, brain, and template that. Meaning it's like a stamp or a blueprint we can put down whenever we want. Move down here. Left object equals create. Then we're going to use objects and world picker. Grab our bullet. And then we're going to say at position. And since this is our left object, it's going to spawn on left spawn, right? Okay, so we know where it spawns, and we know what to do with it. We're also going to say left object forward equals left. So this means for this object is set to left of our object. So we turn it in the way we want, right? It comes in thinking, oh, this is forward, right? And then we say, well, okay, take that idea of what you have is forward, and I want your idea of forward to be what my idea of left is. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. It's more or less just directing where left object goes. Now we're going to use this a couple of times. We're going to paste that 3 more times because we want to fire 4 bullets. Right OBJ. And what we want to change here is right OBJ obviously spawns at right, and its forward is set to right. Then this one is going to be forward OBJ, and it's going to be spawned at forward. There we go. And then, oh, we also want this to go there. Okay. And now one more new variable name, and we'll call this behind. OBJ equals, and then obviously this goes towards behind. And behind objects, forward is going to equal our behind, or our backward. Okay, so let's give an idea. Let me show you what that looks like. Okay, so I think we accidentally missed a reference there. Let's go in and fix that. As you can see, we will soon have 4 streams of bullets. Let's figure out which one is pointed in the wrong direction. Backwards left. It should be pointed forward. There we go. So, cool. Slightly hypnotic, but not exactly what I want. Where it really becomes awesome. So I'm gonna grab this, move all the way down here. We're gonna do yaw, and then slowly. And this will give it that old retro school feel. Okay, now we have this nice, cool little bullet dodgy mechanic, right? So that'll be one way we can create bullets. I'm going to create one more bullet and one more shooter to go along with it. And let's name these over here. So instead of logic cube, we'll call this okay. Let's do spin shooter. I don't know if I love the idea of spiral. Let's do spin shooter, and this one we'll call wave shooter. Okay, and this one we'll kind of get into in a second here. So wave shooter. I'm gonna take this bullet. This bullet is very unassuming. Doesn't have a lot of code to go along with it. But our next bullet will. Okay. So, just to recap here, we have our player, which has our movement on it. We have this logic cube, which has these 4 different points that we're spinning and having it shoot, our little spin shooter. We have our spin bullet, that just simply moves forward at speed. And we'll call that our spin bullet. And then we'll have our wave shooter and our wave bullet. Okay, and let's go in here and open up the brain. This is going to get interesting. So, once, and we'll have a couple more lines after that. I think 3 shall suffice. Oops. So move those guys over. So we're going to need a boolean here. So boolean, new boolean values, move, and then we'll say right. We're going to equal that to true as default. We need a new value that is a number. And this new number value is going to be root x. And we're going to make sure root x is equal to 0. 0. And then we will have one more thing in a moment. We'll go over that in a second. Right now, let's be more worried about this bullet's movement. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to have this bullet move backwards and forwards, but forwards is definitely something we have to have. So first, move with flying forward, and we're going to say at speed, very, very small, 0.15. Next, we're going to say absolute value, and we're going to say, well, 1 started to, so it only is called for 1 frame. So 1 frame as soon as the absolute value of root x is greater than 2. Okay? So absolute value means how far away are you from 0, right? I don't care if you're -2 or if you're +2. If you're 2 away, you are now officially over absolute 2. It's almost like saying, go 3 yards this way or 3 yards that way. I don't care if 3 yards this way is in Europe, and I don't care if 3 yards this way is in Asia, right? I don't care about all these lines or where I am relative to the world. I just care about where I am relative to this single point. And that single point is the absolute value, represented in the number line by 0. So started, absolute value, root x greater than 2. What do we want to do? We want to toggle our move right. Okay. So now, what happens when move right is true? Well, some crazy stuff. We're going to say indent this, and timer 1 in frames loop. Okay, so this is called relatively often. We'll indent this, insert that, and we're going to say move right with flying at speed 3. Oh, looks like I'll need to make a new number. Values, number, new number 3. We want something very, we also want root x to increment, and we'll say increment by, and we'll say 0.5. Okay, copy that, paste that. So now we want, instead of, oh, let's get rid of this, almost, copy the boolean. So now we've toggled, right? The absolute value has reached over 2. That means we, move right will be toggled to false. You could say that when move right is toggled to false, you could set move left, right? But instead of doing that, we're just saying when not move right. So let's insert that there. Not move right, same countdown, but instead of moving object right, we want to move object left. Same speed is fine. Instead of increment, we want to decrement. Okay, so that should do about what we want. And let us show you what that is going to look like once we get this in. Say loop. So let's have a timer, countdown timer, and let's let's say 0. To show you guys what's happening here, we'll do 1.5 loop. And what will happen is we will say create object, well, create objects and world picker, our wave bullet, at position, my position. I don't have to use my, I can just use position. Okay, and now we'll kind of move this over so you can get a better understanding. Now we have this kind of swirling bullet pattern, right? This river of bullets, so to speak, that's going up and down. Kind of cool looking. But as you can tell, now that we have these awesome bullets, we are missing something. We are missing the ability to get hit by these bullets. So let us change that. So with so many objects on screen, it's very easy to cause a ton of lag for your player. I'm going to show you a relatively low, good performance way to see if you're going to be hit by bullets. On the player, I'm going to have something. I'm going to say when bump, or started to, bump, okay, I'm going to indent a line after that, it, which is whatever I just bumped, intersect, and then we're going to do an object set, which is a set of objects. We're going to say this is bullets, but I'm going to make sure it's global. Okay, it intersect global bullets. Okay, so now I know it's part of this object set that I think bullets are. Well, when bullets hit me, I think I should be hurt. So let's be hurt. Let's do damage me. I'll say 2. Destroy hit, the bullet that just hit me. And I think that's good for right now, but I want to leave this line open in case we want more. Okay, and to see if this is working, we're going to insert here and do display meter health max, which is the max number of this meter, which will be max health. Okay, and we're going to display that, modifiers, go into positioning, go into screen location, and we'll do bottom screen, and that should be good. Furthermore, all primitives are set to indestructible, which means they will not take damage. I do not like that, so let's go into properties here, go into combat, and go to health and defenses. No longer invulnerable. Thank you very much. Let's see that. Now we won't probably take a ton of damage here. Oh, one more thing. Of course, these bullets are not part of our object set, global bullets. So we need to add on the first frame to add them to this object set. So we'll say global bullets increment me. Since bullets holds objects, you can say I am an object, add me to this, right? This is imagine just a whole set, right? This is a jar of objects. You just drop in that object in here. Okay. We do the same thing here with this empty line. Global increment me. Cool. Now we know that those bullets are in fact bullets. We get hurt when we touch them, and we have some pretty good idea as to what they're doing. Right? I think I'm just being stopped from going over there. Just want to make sure here. I think that's hitting where I said not to go. Yeah, but as you can see, we're also hit by these guys, but not as great. Let's go check that for a second. Check our wave bullet. Global bullets is indeed incremented by me. You seem to be firing in a way I want. You also seem to be checking the proper global bullets. Let's try this again. We can only be hit every so often. There we go. Okay. Oh, interesting. have to do with the fact that there are too many objects on screen. So this is another thing we have to do here for our bullets. We want to say when, and we'll add a timer, countdown timer, and we'll say maybe 4 seconds, destroy. Okay, so that'll destroy the bullet if it hasn't done anything for 4 seconds. Okay. So that way we don't have a ton of extra bullets flying around and causing lag. Not so great. Add that to this as well. And let's say 0.3. Let's try this guy. Much better. So now we're going to do player movement, and I'll show you how to add these guys onto an enemy. Or I should say player shooting. So, for player shooting, let's make it relatively easy. We'll just have one thing that shoots here. Scale it down. Boop. And we will attach this logic cube. And we will call this gun here. Let's do player. And all player gun does is it's going to fire bullets. So we'll have some player bullets. We'll scale these to about 50%. And add a brain to them. Once. Global. And we'll add them to a different kind of bullet. So we'll go to object sets, new object set, do P. Say me. Okay, great. Also want these guys to move. I believe it's camera down. With flying at speed. Let's make these guys relatively speedy. 0.5. Okay. And what this logic cube will do is on a timer, and let's say we fire relatively quickly at a nice speed of 1.3. We will loop that. Let's say create objects and world picker. Find our player bullet. Create our player bullet at position. Let's go in here, go to properties, and brain, and template true. Let's try this out. Okay, so now I am firing bullets. Bullets are being fired at me. Looking pretty good. I'm just gonna add one enemy in here, represented by a nice little goblin. He's going to be brainless, as most goblins are. And he's going to say when bump. So let's do trigger. In trigger zone. This is a little more performant since this is going to be on our enemies. This is probably a better way to do it. So started to in trigger zone. So, oh, an object just entered our trigger zone. It, again, intersects global P bullets. I want to damage myself. Let's do damage. Damage, specifically me. Let's say 30. Or this is a goblin, so let's do 10. They'll take 3 hits. I want roughly 3 hits with this. Let's move this goblin into somewhere we can see it. Let's see if that works. Okay, pretty good, but we're not destroying our bullets. So, let's go in here. And only do we want to damage me, but we also want to destroy it, the thing that triggered this. And let's do in trigger zone. And let's go open this guy's trigger zone real quick. Go to properties. You will need a controller for this part, but it will work on PC. We'll go to brain, sensors, and let's go to trigger. True. Okay, so now we have a trigger sensor. That's great. And let's move this guy around. I don't want to rotate, I want to scale. That's a little better. I don't really care about this scale, but I do care about the Z scale. Okay, that's roughly good. Let's move it around a little bit. We're gonna be easy on our player. You know, you don't want them complaining that too hard to hit enemies. So that looks pretty good from my point of view. Back onto keyboard mouse. Okay. And since this is using trigger zone, just another thing you can do when something like this is using trigger zone, go into physics. You can take collidable off, and that just helps with a little bit of, oh, hello, there we go, a little bit of performance issues. That should be fine. Also, since this is using a trigger zone, we can also do this. Properties, physics. We can turn this collidable off. There we go. Cool. Okay. And now, after we do this, we're going to make this enemy a little more interesting. Let's move him over here. We're going to add some more to his brain. So now he's looking for it intersects global bullets. We can also move object forward with flying. Right now he's a goblin, but he could be anything. Let's say at speed, and we'll have him be not incredibly speedy, 0.3. Okay, lovely. Also, let's do started, or once. Okay, what we want to set up in the once tile is create, or let's do another object, so values, object, new object variable, and we'll say gun. And gun is going to be equal to this created object, which I will grab from the world picker, and we'll say, I'm going to do wave or spin. Spin shooter, create spin shooter, and then at position. And then best position is my own position, so position. Then make sure every frame gun equals position. Okay, wrong position. Okay, gun position equals position. There we go. Hey guys, so I decided to come back. We've finished the tutorial real quickly from this point on, and I decided to rewind to this point and make a change to how I was doing hit detection. This will be better for performance. So I've changed it to detect, and then them intersect our container. So detect is a relatively cheaper way to see what is around you and should make for better FPS and better performance across all platforms. So here we go. This was over bump and trigger zone, by the way. You can see we're being hit by our bullets here. We were able to kill the goblin. One thing we would like to add is how we handle death. So, when health less than or equal to 0, I want to do two things. Obviously, one is destroy ourselves. but we want to destroy our gun. So we no longer have it firing. After we do that, we will destroy ourself. And one thing we have to add here is go into properties, go into combat, and then health and defenses. We do not want to destroy after death. We will decide when we die and when we get destroyed. Thank you very much. And now, boom. We could add an effect if we want it here, but this is kind of the idea for our basic tutorial. And let's very quickly, before I hand it over to Brian to do all of our interesting spawning and etc., let me show you how to make a different enemy. So we will clone our goblin over here, and we will say, let's make him look a little different. So let's actually go into our studio editor, or character studio. We'll do character, and we'll say color mode, and let's change his skin. Let's make this a red goblin. That sounds great. And our red goblin will shoot wave bullets. So all we have to do in here is go and change our gun from our spin shooter to our wave shooter. Confirm that selection. And now we have one firing wave-like bullets, one firing spiral-like bullets, both getting totally killed by yours truly. And those are the mechanics for your top-down shooter.
Hey guys, SparkBrian here for part 2 of this tutorial. So Zach went through all of the different game mechanics. Now I'm going to show you how to actually make a full game out of this. So during his mechanics, he used a square and these two goblins. So I have gone ahead and created, these are the enemy planes, and this is my plane. I've decided I want to make a top-down aerial shoot 'em up. So the first thing is I just made sure that my plane is forward-facing. Its forward-facing is actually forward, where its propeller art is. To check that, you can just simply select the item, and when you go to rotate, then your rotation is going to show where your forward is. So currently my forward is actually backwards. So let's go ahead and fix that. So I glued all these props together. When you're making kind of detailed propping like this plane, I would suggest gluing everything together. But I want to actually unglue it all. And then I want to, what I'm doing is I'm gluing everything to this logic cube, because this logic cube I can then kind of check for where its front is. So the logic cube, its front is now set to the forward of the plane. You want to make sure you have that set. Now I go to multi-edit. I select my logic cube first, and I've already glued all these pieces together, so I'm going to glue the rest of the plane now to the logic cube. I'm then going to select to glue object, and now this is one object. Now the plane had a few different attachments though. I actually had a propeller here. In this propeller I just simply have that it pitches 60 degrees per frame. This makes it go super fast. So I want to attach this propeller back here. I also have two different gears in the back. I'm kind of going for a steampunk looking aerial shooter. So these gears, I just have them pitching as well. So they're kind of turning and grinding as you're going along. So let's go ahead and attach these. And the last thing is I want to have two guns, one gun on either side of here. So I have these little logic cubes. These will serve kind of as a gun point. So I want to attach those to this. So now the first thing I want to do is I want to just make sure that collidable and invulnerable are properly set here. So I go into combat, health and defense. Looks like invulnerable is on. I want to turn that off. And then let's go to physics. Collidable's on. Physics type is fixed. Okay, that's good. I want that. Okay, so now let's go ahead and actually use this plane as my player instead of this square. So I simply want to copy this, copy the whole page from the square, and I just simply paste it into my new player. And it's pretty much going to work as intended. Now, I also had a gun. I actually got rid of the gun, but I have a logic cube here. This was the gun point. So in the gun point, the original gun point, we just had a simple line of code that every 0.3 seconds it creates that primitive sphere that acts as kind of the ammo. So we just want to paste that into the two different firing points on my player. Right there and right there. And just like that, well, let's first center this a tiny bit. Just like that, we should now have a playable character. I believe I turned these goblins off as well. So let me just turn them on. And I believe these guys, I kind of had preset some code in here just so I could reference that. Okay, so let's turn this on. And so we have the goblins as before, but now we have our plane that's moving instead of the square. So one thing is the plane is not turning too naturally. A lot of times with the plane, it'll kind of pitch a tiny bit. You know, it'll roll a tiny bit that way as it's turning. So just giving you a quick pro tip of how to do that. Because we use keyboard mouse for the controls of moving forwards and backwards, we want to do the same thing for pitching. So I simply want to also add within here that add a new line in here. And for a duration timer of, let's say, 0.15 seconds, I am going to roll quickly. Then D is to the right, so I want to roll quickly inverted here. Then I want to add that when both A and D are not being held down, then I want to roll back towards the world up position, so I'm upright again. So I just simply want to add these two lines here. Then we just want to put in roll. Use the modifier world relative and the world relative up position, so the up position of the world. And just like that, we should now have, as I'm going along, you'll see I am now kind of pitching left and right as I'm turning. So that's just a quick, simple way. And you know, I let go and I go back to the center. So it's just a really quick, simple way to have your plane kind of dipping to and fro. Now, it was also being cut off by this ground right here. And I am going to go ahead and remove all the ground because this is a top-down aerial game, so I no longer need any ground. So, let's quickly take care of that. And then I'm going to last show you just how to set up the enemies and then how to spawn in those enemies. And that'll kind of bring you through the basics of creating this top-down shoot-'em-up. Alright, now things are looking a bit better. I also really like using, when I'm up in the air, the morning clear sky. It's pretty nice. That's looking a bit better. Now you also notice because my plane's quite a bit bigger than the square, it's a bit easier for me to get hit. So that's something that I will need to keep an eye out for. I also want to make sure that I put in here in this bullet, it looks like it's not destroying itself. So I want to make sure that these bullets, after they're created, they also destroy themselves. So after, similar to the other bullets, the previous bullets that Zach was working on, we're going to do after 4 seconds, then this guy destroys himself. Okay, so now we have goblins, and instead we want our wave shooting goblin to be this guy, and our spinning goblin to be this guy. You know, I actually might kind of switch them up too. We'll see. So the spin shooter, we want to copy this enemy's brain right here. Copy the whole page. Bring it in here. And then we have the wave shooter. I want to copy his whole page and paste it inside this guy right here. And with these guys, I also made sure that their forward was actually the forward of their plane, and I also made sure that they were not invulnerable and that kind of all the properties were set up similar to what I showed you what I did with here. I ran through those same steps with these guys. All right, now that I've copied the brains, these goblins are no longer necessary. All right, so let's get started. And you'll see they're firing, but they're firing from the center of their position because I'm just simply saying to create the shooter, create the gun at their position, and their position is at their center. So I want to bring out another logic cube here, and this will be its fire point, similar to the fire point that I had for the main character. And then all you need to do is attach this, and we're going to do the same thing with this guy right here. Then we're going to go ahead and attach that. And we don't need to put any code at all in this little logic cube here. This logic cube is just kind of the reference of here's where you need to fire from. Let's just make sure that that's right at the front of the ship. All right, we go into the brain of this one, and we're going to create the gun at the position of this thing, well, this logic cube. We're also going to have the gun's position be equal to that logic cube's position. And now I'm just going to do the same exact thing right here. And now, just like that, should have these guys firing at me. Now they're going a bit fast, so that's a simple thing to take care of because we just go down here to the movement speed. Let's change that to 0.15 instead of 0.3. And you know, actually, maybe the wave shooters run a bit slower. It's nice to kind of vary up the speed of different enemies. Make them a bit more challenging. So we have 2 enemies, but that's it. After those 2 enemies pass, nothing else happens. So the last thing I'm going to show you is how to actually spawn these enemies. Okay, so how to create enemy spawners. So the first thing I want to do is I like to use logic cubes for my spawners, as I like to use logic cubes for kind of anything else. Make them nice and big and make them pretty far away. And let's plop down 2. I want to have 1 spawner for these guys, 1 spawner for these guys. I'm not going to be doing kind of spawning them at random vectors around the map, but if you are interested in that, we actually covered that in a past tutorial on how to make an endless runner. In these, I'm simply going to choose, after a countdown timer of, let's say, 7 seconds for this one, we're going to loop that. Every 7 seconds, it's going to create one of the enemies. So this one, we'll have that create the bomber enemy. And then I'm going to copy this. I'm going to put it in the second cube. And this is going to create the kind of blimp Leviathan enemy. And just to add a bit of variance, we are going to have this every 5 seconds. So they're not appearing the exact same as each other at the exact same time. We also want to make these into templates. So make sure to go to Brain, turn template to true for both of these, because they are going to be blueprints that we're going to bring into the world. If they're not templates, as soon as you destroy them, you won't be able to recreate them again. So we're going to put the 2 templates here. And now the other important things you'll notice, I want to line this up. I want to line this up. Make sure that, especially when you're doing an aerial game like this, make sure everything is on the same level field. Okay, and just like that, you would think you're done, but let's see an interesting issue that crops up when we're using complex objects like these. So let's go ahead and test. So I'm shooting, and suddenly these guys are just flying by me at super high speed. We don't remember any of this when we were testing earlier. This is super fast. So why is that? And the reason is because there are a lot of objects here very closely tied to each other, touching each other. These are all colliding with each other. They're all overlapping each other. And these are all collidable objects. When something is created in Project Spark, it creates each of the objects and then kind of meshes them together. And if you have a lot of objects that are attached together or that are glued together that are all collidable, they will all collide with each other at first because they don't know they're part of the same prop. And so what that means is when they all collide with each other, they have this rubber band effect where they'll just go shooting off your map. And so if you ever made a map and wondered why things were shooting off, it's probably because of this. And there's a simple thing that you can do. All you want to do is you just want to lock this thing's position for the first few frames while they're being created so that they don't go flying around and that kind of everything settles down and they realize that, oh, all these objects together equals one object. Okay, so what you just want to do is for a duration timer of, let's say, half a second, then your position is going to equal your Y lock. The Y lock is something set very first frame when this object is created. So basically, your position for half a second will be the exact same position as the place you were first created in. And that simple line of code right there will pause that object and keep it from flying off the map. So let's go ahead and test this. And it looks like half a second isn't enough time still. So let's up this to 1 second. And we'll do the same thing in here. Let's just make sure I'm creating properly. All right, let's go ahead and test. And now you'll see these planes are properly coming in. So the magic number we've learned is about 1 second. You want for 1 second for those things to be held back before you let them move. And I'm kind of being creamed here. There's a lot of different flying projectiles. Another quick thing you can change is you'll notice these projectiles start appearing way before these enemies are on the screen. It's a pretty simple thing to fix based on how we set this up. all you need to do is with your bullets, just reduce their countdown timer to when they are destroyed. So instead of after 4 seconds they're destroyed, after 2.5 seconds they're destroyed. So that means they disappear quicker, and therefore you will have less bullets on your map. This is an important number to just mess around with and get to a number you are happy with. And now we have the beginnings of your top-down aerial shooter. You can play around a lot with how many different spawn points you have, how many different enemy types, different power-ups you can make. But I hope what we've shown you kind of gives you enough of the basics to be able to create your own top-down shooter style game. And it doesn't have to be aerial. We just showed aerial in this example. Very easy to not make aerial and make anything else if you're choosing. So I think that'll about wrap it up. If people are interested in this, we will look for doing a part 2 to further expand on the different mechanics that we showed here. Otherwise, we will be working on a lot of other tutorials. Make sure to catch us every Tuesday at 12 noon Pacific time on Twitch for a live stream where we will cover how to make a certain mechanic in Project Spark.